Slugfest, and this time I'm going to get it right. I have the nominees pulled up on my phone instead of a separate tab, and the nominees that we are going to be talking about this time are in the categories of Best Comedy Lead Actor and Best Comedy Lead Actress. Now, we'll start with the actor side, since that race seems to have no suspense. Bill Hader is the top choice of 1,900 users in our prediction center.
Wow.
In second place, we have Ted Danson, who is being predicted by 194 users. So 10 times as many for Bill Hader. Do you agree with that? Is Ted Danson the challenger, Luca?
No. I do think he is the challenger, but I don't even know if there is a challenger. I think Bill Hader is taking this in a cakewalk. The second season of Barry was even more acclaimed than the first one, and he already surprised everyone when he won last year over Donald Glover for Atlanta. His performance was buzzed about even more this season. The show racked up 17 nominations. There is no way anyone's beating him. But I actually do agree with that Ted Danson is in second place, because The Good Place is a Best Comedy Series nominee, and it did fairly well. And it's Ted Danson, a veteran actor who's worked in television for a very long time now, and maybe has a chance sometime down the line. Well, his last chance would be next year, so maybe that's actually his best chance, but he'll have to wait, I fear, for him.
And Zach, who do you think is the challenger to Bill Hader?
One of three septuagenarians between Ted Danson for The Good Place, Michael Douglas for The Kominsky Method, and Eugene Levy for Schitt's Creek. If The Kominsky Method had gotten in for comedy series, I would say it was Michael Douglas, just because he won the Golden Globe and got the SAG nomination. But obviously it did not, and that hinders him. So that's why I have him in third. Ted Danson is the challenger insofar as he's on a show that obviously the Emmy voters really love and has been gaining in popularity over the years. And, he is an Emmy favorite himself. This is the guy who won a couple of Emmys for Cheers and, has been on Curb Your Enthusiasm, Damages, Becker. He's an incredibly popular TV legend. But I think that the fact that, Barry has so many nominations, 17 up from 13 from last year. I think I've got that right. The fact that Bill Hader won last year, the fact that Bill Hader, as a person, has grown in popularity. He's the standout of this new It movie. I know that voters didn't see that when they were voting, but they were at least aware of it, I'm sure. And the fact that this is wholly his creation, right? He's nominated for writing it, directing it, producing it, starring in it. I think that actors, as a general rule, like to think that maybe they could be like Bill Hader and create a highly successful, critically acclaimed television show that they can be the driving force behind. And I think that manifests itself in wins for people like him or, Donald Glover from a couple of years ago for Atlanta. Ted Danson's in second place, but it's a distant second. I suppose that if Bill Hader were not here, maybe he would be winning.
Yeah.
But it's just, it seems like one of those, shall we say, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Veep inevitabilities for Bill Hader.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. I actually have a different person in second place. I've got Eugene Levy for Schitt's Creek, because I'm looking at all these contenders and I'm thinking, which of these contenders are voters actually passionate about, and which ones kind of just, had inertia on their side and got another nomination? Because Don Cheadle, he's in for a new show, but I'm not convinced that the voters actually know that. I feel like they might still be nominating him for House of Lies, and House of Lies they actually gave up on in its final season. He was nominated every season, but the final one, This year, I feel like the competition was a little bit less, so he can get back in for his Showtime dramedy, which is just House of Lies, but set in 1987. And then we've got Anthony Anderson, who is now the lone acting holdout for Blackish after the show has been dropped pretty much everywhere else, although it might win costumes. And the episode that he submitted is their 100th episode, and it's about how his kids aren't familiar with the music of Prince, but it's really a non-starter in terms of something that would have done well under the tape system. Michael Douglas did win the Globe, but I feel like his show really underperformed at the Emmys. That it still got in a few places kind of suggests to me that maybe it was in the top 10 all over the place, but voters just didn't really care enough to push it over the line. Schitt's Creek, though, blew up this year. We were not really expecting that because it had been snubbed for so many years, but I guess people have been catching up with it on Netflix. And Eugene Levy is not the, seen as the standout of the show, but I feel like this is kind of one of those cases like Kyle Chandler or Matthew Rhys, where maybe he's overshadowed by his female co-lead over the course of the series, or maybe for the particular season that we're talking about, but he happens to have an easier category. So if there's an upset, which there will not be under any circumstances, I think it will be Eugene Levy.
Yeah. I mean, I have him in third, at least, because Michael Douglas, Don Cheadle, and Anthony Anderson just aren't in a comedy series nominee. And last year, 15 of the 16 acting awards went to actors who were nominated for series that were nominated for the top prize. And that's just a trend that I cannot ignore. Plus, Schitt's Creek has passion, which I think something like Black Monday doesn't have, or something like Blackish just doesn't have anymore. And I do think passion can lead to win sometimes, but I think Eugene Levy is just someone like Ted Danson who will probably have to wait, or could win next year for the final season of Schitt's Creek, if it is indeed eligible.
All right, so we will switch over to the Best Comedy Leading Actress race, which has a lot more heat in it. We have last year's winner, Rachel Brosnahan, for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She won the Emmy, she won the TCA Award, she won Critics' Choice, she won the Golden Globe, and she won the SAG Award. And now she sits at third in our odds. She is behind Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who, of course, has won for every season, but took last year off because the show wasn't on, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who is hot right now for Fleabag, just won a bunch of TCA awards, previously won the BAFTA for the first season. And beyond that, we also have Catherine O'Hara for Schitt's Creek. She's won, I think, maybe 4 Canadian Screen Awards for that role. Then we've got Natasha Lyonne in the most nominated new show this year, Russian Doll. And we have Christina Applegate as the lone nominee for Dead to Me. But I would actually vote for her the winner if I had a ballot myself. So it's a stacked category. Let's start with Rachel Brosnahan, since I know both of you are predicting The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel for Best Comedy Series. Why would she not repeat for playing The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel herself?
Well, I think there are 2 reasons. I think the first reason is that there are 2 other people who just have a much stronger chance, and I guess we'll talk about those 2 in a second, at least for me. And the second reason is I think at this point there is a Rachel Brosnahan fatigue. She's probably so absolutely amazing on her show, but she won the Emmy last year and then she swept everything after that. She won the Golden Globe for the second time. She won this Critics' Choice the second time. She won SAG for the first time. So I think at one point people will feel like they have rewarded her for the show, and they might just want to move on to other people. And we do have a lot of, first timers or people contending for the first seasons of their shows or breaking in this race for the very first time, who I think voters will gravitate toward more this year.
I love how Julia Louis-Dreyfus has won 6 times, but there's Rachel Brosnahan fatigue. Having said that, I actually agree. I don't even think that she should necessarily be nominated this year. just because the category is so strong.
And I should say, as a person who has Maisel as my temporary placeholder before I switch to either Fleabag or Barry, I think that it is a little bit of a been there, done that, because she's won so many awards for this show in such a short period of time.
Yes, that's it.
Even though Maisel's had a significant uptick in nominations, it's no longer the hot new show. Oddly enough, Fleabag took that mantle away from it, even though it's a second season show that had zero Emmy attention whatsoever when it premiered 3 years ago. But it's just the fact that there are other contenders in this race this year who have a stronger Emmy narrative than she does. It was one thing last year when she was on the eventual comedy series winner and didn't have to compete against six-time winner Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Not only that, but was competing, in a weaker category, to be perfectly blunt about it. But I think that all of those things just worked in her favor last year, and this year, she seems like that comfortable third place at best choice. Now then again, wouldn't surprise me if she won again. Just like it wouldn't surprise me if Julia won again. But I think that they're going to go with something a little bit different this year.
And one more thing about Rachel is that she could have been nominated for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Comedy Series for Saturday Night Live. And we know that, pretty much everyone gets nominated for Saturday Night Live. And she did miss that nomination, even though I think our odds were very close to predicting her, or did predict her. So if there were significant support for her, I think we would have seen that in a second nomination, like in Comedy Guest Actress. And I agree with Zach. I just feel like there are other people in this race who have a much stronger narrative, who I guess we'll talk about now.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, though. I remember last year when we all thought that Elizabeth's nomination would have a surplus of support and she would also get in for Top of the Lake.
Yeah.
A role that she had actually been nominated for, had won the Globe for, and she was snubbed. And, it's not like even in the Comedy Guest Actress category, the voters were averse to checking off people who didn't have the most acclaimed hosting stints, but they just love from their other work this year. I'm talking about Sandra Oh for Killing Eve. She's nominated, and Rachel Brosnahan is not. So, Luca, you said you wanted to talk about somebody else?
Yes. So I do think Julia Louis-Dreyfus is going to win this. She is going to make history once again. I just think she has the narrative just because, she took the year off and she had to deal with having cancer. And, it's the final season of Veep. And even though the show only got 9 nominations, I just feel like they will want to reward her and have her on that stage again. Having her return, to a win is something I think a lot of Emmy voters will want to see. That being said, I do have Phoebe Waller-Bridge in second place because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is just one of the hottest people at the moment. She has 4 Emmy nominations. Fleabag got 11 nominations, so there's absolutely a possibility that she takes this, but I just can't imagine them not giving this to Julia.
Well, I can.
That's good.
Which is why I am predicting Phoebe Waller-Bridge at the moment. Look, bet against Julia Louis-Dreyfus at your own peril. And if she were nominated in a category that included the usual favorites of Lily Tomlin, Allison Janney, Tracy Ellis Ross, Pamela Adlon, I would say she's taking this in a walk. But she's not nominated against those usual contenders. She's got Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's the hottest person on earth right now, in a show that has 11 Emmy nominations, 3 of which are for her personally. She's up against Rachel Brosnahan, who's last year's winner, and another formidable comedy series contender. You got Natasha Lyonne in Russian Doll. You got Christina Applegate in Dead to Me. And you even got Catherine O'Hara in Schitt's Creek, who people adore, and they adore in that show. I think if there's like a nice little 4th place spoiler, that's her. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, it seems more logical that she would win in the writing category than in the acting category. But just like with Julia, this is the last chance they're ever going to get to reward her for this show. And if my theory about Fleabag being stronger in comedy series overall than we're expecting is true, then I think that there's a strong possibility that she is going to win in the actress category. The other thing that might help her, oddly enough, is the fact that she's going up against two previous winners. Two, in a sense, consecutive winners, right? Rachel Brosnahan and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. They could split the votes with each other, theoretically, and give Phoebe that nice third place victory. Now, like I said, I'm probably the lone nut job who is predicting Julia Louis-Dreyfus to lose. But I think that if there's ever going to be a year where she is upset, this would be the one.
But do you worry about the fact that Phoebe Waller-Bridge could be covered in other categories? Or do you think that's on their radar? Because if it is, don't you think they could think this is the place to reward Julia Louis-Dreyfus? Or do you think that doesn't matter in Phoebe's case?
Absolutely, it worries me. Yeah, absolutely. It could just be she gets a writing award, and that's the prize for her, and that's the prize for the series.
Yeah.
But at the same time, look, Fleabag is the show that everybody's talking about right now, and that worked for Maisel last year in comedy series. That worked for The Handmaid's Tale 2 years ago in drama series. That could work for Fleabag this year. If it's the show that everybody loves, it's the hot new thing, then maybe that's the show that sweeps. And I just can't see that show winning multiple prizes and lead actress not being one of them.
Good point.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that we learned last year, or maybe it was just a fluke last year, is that the Emmys are not really going to award, Henry Winkler without awarding Bill Hader as well. They like to award the actual face of their show. They're not going to award supporting performance from The Crown without getting to Claire Foy first. And we have seen with Donald Glover a couple of years ago, showrunner of an acclaimed show kind of win, taking into account all that they contributed, not just their acting, but also their producing and directing, and maybe compensating for any lack thereof in the performance. But Phoebe Waller-Bridge actually has an outstanding performance in Fleabag, particularly in the first season, which I think is discounted some since this is technically for the second season. But I don't think that voters watched the first season when it came out 3 years ago, or it would have gotten a nomination somewhere. I think that voters have only caught up on the 6 hours that exists of Fleabag in the last couple months. And that includes her performance in the first season that I think should have beaten Julia Louis-Dreyfus a few years ago and did win a BAFTA award off the tape system. So I think she's got the goods. And Zach, you're not the lone nut job not predicting Julia, because I am also not. I feel like there is this perception that everyone loves Veep and Julia Louis-Dreyfus is going to win again because she needs to continue or set her record or whatever she's doing with records these days. But I think that's just a perception. I think that we saw in nominations that individually, the voters don't actually care about Veep. They dropped it from half of its categories after they had gone way overboard with it for the last several years, both at the Emmys and with the guilds. I think that they've moved on, and I think that'll even extend to Julia Louis-Dreyfus, even though she is unstoppable.
I agree. I'm glad not to be the only nutcase over here at Gold Derby. You and I are going to either go down with that ship together, or we are going to have bragging rights for the rest of eternity for being the ones to call that.
You guys will go down.
Well, it could just be Rachel Brosnahan too. She's also really unstoppable. So
that would honestly shock me, though. It wouldn't shock me, but I'd honestly be surprised if Rachel won over Julia and Phoebe it just doesn't seem like I think if Maisel had another year like it did last year, where it is in writing, where it is in directing, where the buzz is more there, then I think she would stand a chance. But right now, Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the hottest person, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus just is, the one looking to get the 7th statuette for Veep. So I would be very surprised. I think someone that is not going to win, but someone who does have significant support is Catherine O'Hara, who, like Eugene Levy, I just think has a lot of passion. And there's a reason why all of a sudden, after so many seasons, she got into this race. I wouldn't underestimate her maybe next year. But right now, I think she's comfortably in 4th place.
Yeah, I feel like she's got to win next year. not looking too deep into whether that's based in anything, but yeah, I feel like next year will be her time. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think we've added more mystery to a race that usually doesn't have one any. So congrats to us.
Yeah,
I feel like all the mystery will be gone after the Creative Arts Awards.
Mm-hmm.
If Fleabag takes guest actress, if it takes casting, if it takes editing, then I think it's just done.
But it would have to take all 3 of those, I think, to actually, or at least 2 of them, because we saw last year that a guest win or a win in one of the guest categories doesn't translate into wins at the main telecast, as we saw both The Handmaid's Tale and Atlanta win a guest category and then get shut out completely at the main ceremony. So I'll have to pay attention, or I'll have to be careful to see how much I actually factor the creative arts into my predictions. But if it does win casting, if Fleabag does win casting, then that's a warning.
Mm-hmm.